Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Pennyworth. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we have Alfred going to Thomas for help on trying to get out of the country, but obviously that's not going to be the easiest thing. You're going to have to grease some palms, and it's going to basically cost $5,000 a head, that being him, Dave Boy, and his mom. Like I said, $5,000 each. So Thomas is offering to give him the money, but for Alfred, it's like, I don't want to be in your debt because me being in your debt means I'm in the CIA debt. And I think that's a complicated thing about Thomas. It's like you never know whether he's doing something because he really wants to. Is it really because Alfred, I do consider us friends, or is it you are a potential asset that can be used in the future? I mean, that's kind of what Alfred was in the beginning, and kind of potentially, because we see later on he is taking records of it. And that's kind of something Martha was getting at, because it's like, oh, like, are you really concerned about me, or are you just trying to pump me for information? And then later on it does seem like, I think he's kind of torn between the two, what he's supposed to do as part of the CIA, while also, what he wants to do. So, like, it seems a little more 50-50 when it comes to Martha, maybe 70-20, 70-25 when it comes to Alfred. At least that's how I'm viewing it. So Alfred feeling like, okay, the only way I'm going to do this is if I get the money myself. And obviously him and Dave Boy decide they have to work with Goalie. It's like they don't like it. They know that he is kind of a fox, that the fact is you can't really trust him. But it's like, well, we already knew a lot of that going into it, and we work with them regardless. So we need to get out. So also, I think what's going through Alfred's mind is like, the last time situation went sideways, not only did him and Goalie kind of go at it, it was also the thing of, I also kissed Melanie, his wife. So I think that's there, but he's not really telling anyone about that. But so they decide to go through with the job. They're planning on robbing a wrestling place. And I think it's so interesting that, like, Dave Boy's the only one who didn't know it was fixed. And I think that's kind of innocent, because he's like, he thinks things get bent a little bit. Sure, the rules, but, like, outright fixing, it's like, no. Everyone's like, and you don't know that Father Christmas isn't real either, so it's like them making fun of him. But Dave Boy was kind of right at the end of the day, because everyone had it planned out, like, the match is going to go this long, because they're supposed to go this long, because everything's according to plan. It's meant to, they're meant to drag the show out to make it seem more legit, when in actuality it isn't. But obviously nothing in life works the way you think it does, because you always have to account for there being things out of your control, and things get heated in the ring, and the fight ends up getting cut short, by 10 minutes or something like that. So that's interesting. What's also interesting too is that dude said, like, you're going to get your bollocks nailed to the floor, and Alfred's like, yeah, people say that, but it never happens. And the guy was like, well, you'll see. So I guess it's like, who's ever in charge of that, like, wrestling place? Like, it might be like some mob type people, maybe. It seemed like that's what they were kind of implying, like, might come after you. So I think that's still going to be something we see potentially come out about in the future. But obviously, even Alfred at the beginning was saying, like, hey, let's get out of here because the job blew. Like, because if we blow the safe now, like, everyone's going to know. But Goalie's like, it's so exciting. So, boom, pulls the trigger. And because of that, obviously one of his people's also, like, he's like, I'm so hot. Like, what kind of idiot takes off their mask during a robbery? That is the most... You're supposed to... I guess no matter how well-trained you are as soldiers and blah, 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 you're still rank amateurs at this whole thing. You've been doing this for at least a while. You think that's just like the stupidest... At the very least, when you heard people coming, when you blocked the door, I guess he threw his mask down, because I was like, that was at least a perfect opportunity to put your damn mask back on, but you didn't. And started shooting innocent people as they were coming out the damn door. To me, that was the dumbest thing ever, because you could have easily blended into the crowd, because you're like, I don't have a mask on. Let me stand off to the side as the crowd passes. Let me just bleed into it. Like, that's all you needed to do. Like, that would have been the smart thing to do. But as Alfred says later on, he panicked. Which he's like, no, I didn't panic. It's like, no, you panicked. You start shooting off. Like, that would have been common sense, because your friend, she didn't shoot. You're the only one that shot any of the shots in this episode. But also, like I said, Alfred wanted to leave initially, but it was like, the moment he saw that money, it's like, Dave Boy, get the bag. So, that, hey, this is an opportunity, get us enough money and everything. And obviously, Alfred got separated from the others and that lady was charging at him. He was like, please don't. I was like, please don't tell me you're going to pull the trigger. Luckily, Alfred didn't. Doesn't make it any better. That woman still died. She was innocent. It's not like she was, it wasn't like he had to defend himself under the situation because he was in the wrong under the circumstances. But obviously, what pisses Alfred off is the moment they get back there, they're celebrating. For him, it's like, we're murderers. Like, you want to act like we're not soldiers, we're thieves, we're murderers. And even Day Boy being like, hey, we may be like murderers, but at least we're rich murderers. But I mean, obviously, it's just like, it's the get what you can get. Like, obviously, this is a very like dire do or die type of situation for them. It's eat or be eaten is kind of what the metaphor I was trying to go for. Because for Alfred, obviously what they did doesn't sit well with him, but I think it's also the thing is for Alfred, yeah, he did a lot of compromising things last season, but I think it's also the thing of he tried to do the right thing as well, and what did doing the right thing do? It didn't do anything in the end. He lost his dad because of trying to do the right thing, trying to be a better person. He lost Esme. Like, it's like, what does being good do for you? Nothing. Like, you get what you, that's, for him, it's probably in view in the world of you get what you get. You do whatever you have to do to survive. You might have to do some stuff you're not proud of, but you do whatever you need to survive. And for him, it's about making sure him, Day Boy, and his mom survive, especially after losing, like, he already felt like that, but having lost Baza 2 episodes ago, like, obviously that still resonates with him, and even more reason to get out while he can. Because it was even interesting because Alfred was like, oh, why do I have to come up with the plan? Why don't you come up with the plan for once? He was like, after all this time, now you want to... Because I think, once again, Baza kind of acted as the mediator because he kind of was like the angel on Alfred's shoulder to try and point him in the right direction a lot of times. So without that, they're both kind of spiraling because, they've always had Baza to kind of be that linchpin, I guess, to kind of keep them, like, at least decently on the right path. He was the angel on the shoulder, not just for Alfred, but Day Boy as well, and they're kind of both lost without him. Alfred ends up going home, and his mom kind of figures that he was the one responsible. Yes, he didn't pull the trigger, but he was still complicit with everything that they did. I'm surprised he didn't outright lie and say, oh, I got this, honestly, Thomas Wayne gave me this money. He could have easily have lied about that, but he didn't, because he can't lie to his mom. She's still right through him, and she slaps him, and is like, get out. Because it's like, you're lucky your dad's dead, because seeing what you've become, which is sad, too, because, like, I guess at the very least, his dad died doing what he believed in. Like, he was going to kill people, but that was just because that's what he believed. He thought, it's like, what are you doing? Like, at least your father did it because that's also the complicated thing. I mean, maybe that's also what it is, too. Maybe she's taking her frustrations out about Alfred's dad on him. Because also, like, he did a similar thing. He did a very similar thing of, like, but it's different because at least there's at least some form of, like, hey, he was trying to do what was right for the country. You're just looking out for yourself. Like, I mean, because it's also, these are innocent people. Maybe the argument could be the people that his dad was trying to kill weren't necessarily innocent people. So maybe that's the argument. Like, obviously, there's a lot of similarities between them. But, like, that's why I feel like she's probably just as frustrated towards Alfred's dad, and seeing him doing the same thing just pissed her off. It's like, yes, he didn't pull the trigger, but it's like, leave, I'm not going with you, especially knowing where he got the money for this. You're doing some illegal stuff, doing some shady stuff here and there. Sure, this is something else. Not just one, a lot of innocent people died because of that, So, obviously, we see Alfred kind of a little lost, obviously, later on, especially when, like, the bombs are hitting the city, and it's just, I think there's a part of him, is worried about his mom, but it's like his mom wants to have nothing to do with him. It's just, he feels like he failed. He was supposed to meet with Sandra because she's recording her demo, but he said he'd try to make it, but she's like, you always try. And obviously it's the whole thing of, right, he still hasn't told her about them leaving, but he's like, no, when I get the chance, I'll, that makes this situation even worse because it's like you're just stringing her along. But because I don't think Alfred's ready and willing to admit sadly, he does care for Sandra, but also he doesn't want to be alone right now. With everything that's going on, if he breaks Sandra's heart, because I think on some level he wants to still be the good guy. And it's like, as long as I don't break her heart, then I'm not the bad guy. But it's like, it's becoming harder and harder to, and there's even a moment later on when, like, there's a mirror nearby. He doesn't even look at it because I think it is a thing. I think it's a little symbolic of, hey, he can't even, like, he doesn't recognize who's in the mirror anymore. Probably hasn't for a long time. And doesn't even want to look in that direction. I don't know. I think it's interesting. Obviously, Melanie's going through some, it's like obviously like Gully is abusive towards her, the way he kind of treats her, like, oh, like, be respectful to men, like the money they make pays for your fucking shoes, and she's like, thank you for my fucking shoes, and my husband's abhorrent behavior of something of that nature. And it's like, oh, I love that woman. And it's like, but even Alfred's like, oh, he hurt you, so you're trying to hurt him, and she's like, no, you can't hurt Gully, he's made of bone. So it's like, do you want me to leave? And him and Melanie do their thing, which is like heartbreaking, especially when you cut that in with like Sandra singing her song that love is a losing war. It's sad. But it's like also, it's a lot. It's actually interesting because Thomas had said this about Martha, that Martha, like, everything Martha does almost seems like she's trying to find a way to die. It's like you hate yourself so much, like, and just to make yourself feel better, you kind of tear other people down. Obviously, because both of them kind of got their issues, because she's like, oh, like, yes, I don't love myself nearly as much as you do. Maybe you could deal with a little more, like, of disliking yourself. Because for him, it's like, any woman would be, and she's like, oh, go ahead and finish that sentence, because it's like, oh, any woman would be lucky. It was almost like he was saying, like, any woman would be lucky to be with me, or something. He was about to say that, because he comes from a very, obviously, entitled background. We still don't know a lot about Martha's background, but considering him being from the family that he is and stuff like that, like I said, he definitely cares about Martha, because obviously for him it's like, oh, like, we've had sex like 4 times, so we're in a relationship. She's like, no, we've had sex 4 times. That's all there is to it. So, but it's also the thing of, I think Thomas has a hard time saying, like, when he wants something, I think as a Wayne, he's always kind of gotten what he wants, and Martha isn't, biting. So they end up kind of, they have their sweet moments together, and then they're just at each other's throats. So it's not the healthiest of relationships. Maybe they can work past some of what I consider a very toxic relationship, like, because he was basically saying, like, you kind of feed off of people a little bit. Like I said, with the whole, you tear people down just to kind of make yourself feel better a little bit. It's like, oh, so you're calling me a vampire. He's like, I misspoke. It's like, yeah, like I said, not the healthiest of relationship, which is going to be interesting to see kind of what that necessarily turns into, whether they're kind of saying in this continuity their relationship was kind of unhealthy the entire time, even up until having Bruce until they died, like they might not have had the best relationship. I mean, granted, relationships are struggles, they're not easy, but it's like, oh, you guys aren't even officially a couple yet, and you're kind of as messed up as you are. To be fair, both of you are coming into this situation pretty messed up in your own regard, so. But the thing, I was wondering, it's like, maybe the reason why I was also tying that into Alfred is because I think Alfred's in the same boat. I think, Alfred hates himself right now, and he's doing a lot of very self-destructive behavior. Like I said, doing whatever it takes to survive and get what he wants. So kind of in a very similar boat. So I just thought that was kind of a fascinating element. So we'll see how things turn around. He finally has the money. His mom has no intentions of going, so is he just going to leave with Dave Boy? Are you going to finally tell Sandra the truth? Because you kind of have no choice, because you said once you got the money, you tell her the truth, but I think things are going to go sideways with this whole goalie thing, especially we've seen how goalie handles things. He ended up killing his boy Banjo because it's like, yeah, your face is out there in the newspaper, so kind of what Alfred's saying, he already felt it, but I'm sure like the moment Banjo's face was in the newspaper, it's like, yeah, kind of got to get rid of you. But it also shows you he's not afraid to take care of things if need be. So eventually, I think it'll be a situation where it's like eventually goalie's probably going to find out. We already see how abusive he is towards Melanie. It's not going to be that far of a leap that he will kill her if he finds out about her and Alfie. He'll probably leave Alfie alive and try and torture Alfie by either going after Dave Boy and his mom, or using Melanie as a means, or Sandra, and killing or hurting one of them just to hurt him. It's like, oh, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you. We'll see, but I think things could sadly only end tragically under those circumstances. Like I said, we'll have to ultimately wait and see where things kind of go on that front. Another angle to this story I thought was really interesting is the whole Bess situation, because obviously that dude walks into Peggy's store and it's like, all right, he's looking for some items and stuff like that, and he looks at Bess and Bess looks at him and is like, why do I know you? I'm like, do you two know each other? And she's like, George. I'm like, I don't know. And she says a tower, and it still didn't click in my head, and then it took a while for me, but right, season 1 when she got locked up, that dude, I was like, right. No wonder he recognized her and she remembered him. Obviously, though, under those circumstances, of course, they'd remember each other. But obviously Bess kind of like knocking him out because she couldn't remember his name off the top of her head, but it had to be reminded because obviously Katie's coming up being like, well, what's this all about? And it's like, oh, like, kind of have to kill him because he knows my face. But then Peg accidentally lets it slip about, like, their past. It's like, wait, what did you do? And it's like, it's none of your business. And she's like, basically, fuck off the pair of you because she gets super frustrated because Katie's telling her, like, don't kill any more people. Don't do this. Well, Peg kind of explains a little bit more about Bess. Like, obviously their youngest sister, May, ended up drowning. And everyone assumed she did. Even Katie being like, did she? It's like, no, of course not. Bess would die for her. So, but ever since then, it's like Bess has kind of had nothing but bad luck. She tries to do the right thing. She tries to be good, but then, you know, stuff happens that kind of obviously lead her down a path. Because we've seen when it comes down to it, Bess can be kind-hearted at times. Obviously, the whole situation with Kate in the first place, it's like, you saved her. The Esme thing, granted that ended up being a little obsessive stalkerish, but, you know, she wanted to get revenge for her because that was her friend or her love, you know, so it is a situation of, Bess is a very complicated character. I mean, she always kind of has been, but, I thought was interesting. But Katie decides, like, no, you know what? I'm going to stick here. This is where I want to be. And, you know, Bess is like, really? And it's like, yeah, but you're going to have to stop doing bad things. She's like, I'll try it. It's like, no, you got to promise me. And then she promises her, and they're holding hands and everything. And you see it's like, oh, like, they're, you know, Bess is so happy. And even later on, we see them kind of curled up together, kissing. And it's like, oh, like, Bess is, it's kind of interesting. Once again, it's like we're cutting that together with, like, well, you have Martha and Thomas having their issues. Obviously, Alfred going through what he's going through. And it's just interesting that the one person who's kind of having a happily ever after right now to a certain extent, we'll kind of have to wait and see how well that works out, is Katie and Bess. It's interesting how that they're the only couple that's kind of working out right now, despite probably all odds. What was also interesting, too, we found out what happened to George. George is just out there in front of, like, you know, he's in all that leather just kind of on display like that. So they didn't kill him, but, you know, they've got to basically hold him prisoner. I guess that was their compromise on how they potentially handle that. So, you know, Katie isn't above finding ways around things. So I'm wondering, is there going to be a reveal with her, or is it just going to be like hey, like her and Bess are going to be a team? I don't know. I'm curious to see where that story goes, because that's definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, another angle to this whole thing is we have Lucius. We spend a little more time with him. He's actually trying to send a message to Thomas. Hey, get me out of here ASAP. Granted, the message fell behind the desk, so Thomas didn't see it until later. So hopefully he's able to get him out. Obviously, Lucius has a lot of information. Because that was also the big thing of like, well, who does he work for? Like, how did you get mixed up in this? I mean, I guess it makes sense. Thomas is working with the CIA. You get someone as smart as Lucius. I'm wondering, does Thomas and Lucius actually have a connection even this far back? And he's actually the one that kind of signed Lucius up for this, like suggested Lucius to kind of be their inside source for this. Because I guess it's like I guess he's even in America, maybe he's known as being a really smart dude. So that's how he was able to kind of get on board this like Stormcloud project. Or maybe it's like, hey, we got scientists from all over the world, and Lucius was just able to kind of fake it till you make it type of situation of getting inside. I don't know. I'm curious in the long run, like what ends up like becoming of that. But another angle is the conversation between Gaunt, Francis, and Aziz, and obviously trying to come up with some compromise of, hey, like you basically only own like 5%, like you have London, and that's kind of it. But it's like, yeah, but socially, we are the ones ahead because no one's supporting you guys considering all that you've done. Like, you're destroying the places. So you need people that are on your side are usually only there by fear, but other people like believe in our side, in the England League side of things. But for Francis, it's like you need to surrender, because if you don't, we're going to use Stormcloud, which he's trying to play like, oh, we know all about Stormcloud. I'm just curious whether you know whether or not Harwood has prioritized. It's like, no. Like, you don't want to see it. He's like, something of the biblical nature. And she's like, yes. So what the real ins and outs of that deal ended up being, we don't know, because Hayward doesn't listen to her later on, because Salt, being the bastard he is, sprinkled some salt into this situation, because it's like, what are you really getting out of this? Because I guess, because more so than anything, Francis is the one thing that's in his way, because obviously you have Harwood being all about using the device, using Stormcloud, but Francis is the one that's kind of the angel on his shoulder saying, like, don't do this, don't go down this route. So I'm wondering, is this simply for Salt to be like, oh, like, he wants to do what he wants to do. Like, he likes to be able to run his experiments freely. So I think with her, the whole point was he set that up because you knew that he was trying to remove her from the equation. Luckily, she doesn't get killed by Harwood. You'd almost think he would, with treachery like this. But it's because they go so far back. But for him, it's like, how do I know how to trust you? She's even like, oh, are you taking your pills? Salt had to have replaced his pills. So either Salt trying to put him in a position where it's like, oh, you use my device and eventually you become so deranged that I end up taking hold of it. Like, I don't know whether Salt's aiming for that or whether it is the medicine's having an adverse effect, or it's because it seems like he is taking the pill. So like, that's why I get the feeling like Salt might have switched him, but I don't know. Could be some other dissent amongst them. It didn't seem like Salt was too happy when he heard Harwood say like, oh, like, oh yeah, like, I'm the one that sent her to talk to Aziz, and it was almost like, he was almost like, damn it, I thought I had him, but it's like, now he's still sticking up for, I think it's still a thing of, well, maybe it'll work out for me in the long run, but, like, obviously, we saw his plan from a mile away. Like I said, it's just, like, what his end goal is just the one thing we're still not 100% clear on. Which is sad, because she's like, I was trying to help you. He's like, yes, I know, because I've lost my mind. It's like, you kind of have. You're already a little bit of a deranged man, but at least there was something to, I mean, granted, who knows, who's to say he would, if they hadn't gotten interrupted last season, who's to say that this isn't where things would have gone anyway, I mean, to be fair, they wiped out most of the league last season. So, but now they have the Queen and the England League kind of still being the resistance, putting up probably even more of a resistance to the league, the original league, because there's no bit of the original league really left. So, well, except for I think certain aspects like Ripper and everything. Granted, he's in this for himself. Well, to be fair, he's also part of the CIA. Like, he's kind of like their inside source, so they back the league with all this. So they're still, because even they're not really choosing a side in all this, because they're just waiting for the aftermath of everything, kind of like previously. But regardless, interesting developments on a lot of fronts. I'm really curious to see where things kind of take us going forward through the rest of the season. I'm excited to have Pennyworth back. I'm curious to see, like I said, where the rest of the season goes. I don't know if I don't think the show's taking any more breaks, because I wasn't even aware the show was taking a break when it originally took a break. So, but I think we might have the rest of the season back. I think just once again, everyone finding a way to try and work around the new circumstances, I think, is kind of where a lot of TV shows and productions are. So, like I said, regardless, I'm really interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.